I'm Rick Lewis with Phenom Hoop Report, and on today's Coach's Corner, I have Coach Gary Ellington of Weddington High School. And welcome, Coach.
Thank you, Rick. I appreciate you having me.
Coach, you have one of the most unique and interesting stories of any coach that I have spoken to. And we want to give the folks out there a great background as far as you as a coach and an individual, and just tell people what you went through your difficult journey to get where you are today. You was telling me you were born and raised in Raleigh, North Carolina. You grew up an NC State fan, but that wasn't always easy.
No, it wasn't. It was not easy at all. Yeah, 99.9% of Ellingtons are Carolina fans.
So you grew up in a Tar Heel household.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. You said you met Coach Jim Valvano when you were in your youth.
Yes,
And
sir.
that one meeting with Coach Jim Valvano basically encouraged you to be a coach one day. Elaborate on that.
It did. And it was a meeting that probably lasted 15 minutes, maybe. And my grandmother worked at NC State, and so I would spend a lot of time with them during Christmas time. And one Christmas I was there, and she said, "Come with me. I have a surprise for you." And so we go to the university, and she introduced me to Valvano. And of course, I knew who Jimmy B was, but I never met him. And I just remember how nice he was and how he took the time. He didn't seem like he was in a hurry. Just remember him taking the time to talk to me and gave me a picture and signed it. And I kept it. I kept it forever. Actually, I have a funny story about that. I actually lost it for a while and then found it. But I just remember that, and I thought, he's so nice. And then I remember watching him on television, and I thought, this guy is nuts. And it just, it's something stuck with me about him. And truthfully, he's the reason why I became a state fan and still am a state fan. But he's also the reason. That's the first thought I ever had in my mind. I wonder if I could do that. I wonder if I could be a basketball coach because I like him. So yeah, it was an interesting story, and he was someone that I looked up to growing up for sure.
Was this before or after they won the national championship?
It was after they won the national championship. Yeah, it was after.
So he was
Uh,
that humble and genuine after he won the national championship.
After he was, yeah, and my grandmother, she was known to keep people in line. So I don't know if he was just acting that way because he was afraid of my grandmother. But yeah, I just remember him being really nice, and so the picture that he signed, I kept it forever, and then I misplaced it, and I went maybe 10 years without knowing where it was at, and it turns out I had stuck it in the pages of a book. And a couple of years ago, I just was going through old stuff and I found that picture. And the first thing I did was call my grandmother and I said, "Do you remember that time you took me to NC State?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "I just found that picture that he had signed and he wrote Merry Christmas on it to me. And I just found it. So now I put it in a frame and it's actually on the wall behind me."
Before I got really heavily involved in basketball, I was a sales rep, and I remember I met Jim Valvano in a restaurant twice, and he was as gracious and polite as
Yep.
anyone you would ever want to meet, and he just had that infectious smile. Um, Now, as you were growing up through high school, and you said you had an opportunity to play at the small college level, but you didn't take advantage of it at first. Talk about the trials and tribulations that you went through high school and then right after high school.
Well, in high school, leading up to high school, parents separated when I was in the fourth grade, which is kind of what built this love of basketball, and it became my outlet. But I grew up in a family with that. No one in my family had gone to college, and so when I played basketball and had the opportunity to play basketball, small college, junior college, Division III, it was exciting because I was going to get to go to college, and no one in my family had done that. And just it kind of tells me who I was at that point in time. I didn't know how to handle adversity. I didn't know how to handle setbacks, and so the story is I was going to go to this college, and I had decided I was going to go there, and the coach got a new job at a bigger school, and I thought, well, that's great. I'll just go with him and to this bigger school. And so I called him up and I said, hey, congratulations on the new job. And I said, so I go with you to the new school, and he said, no. That's not how it works. And he said, you're not good enough to play at the school that I'm going to. I said, okay, well, if that's the case, then I'll stay where I'm at and play for the new coach. And things just didn't feel right. So long story short, at that point, I had no idea how to handle adversity. And so I just thought, man, it is what it is. It's not in the cards for me. And so I said, I guess I'll just do what everybody else in my family has done, and I'll go get a job. Nothing wrong with that. And I'll go and work like my dad, who's a hard worker. And I got a construction job, and I did that for 6 years after high school. I worked construction, worked for a telephone company, worked for the cable company, and it was it just kind of, if I had better guidance. If I had tougher skin and been able to handle adversity better, there were other options for me after high school, and I didn't take advantage of it.
So immediately after high school, you went to go work in the construction industry for 6 years, from basically 1996 to 2001. What was it like being in that type of situation and environment?
Yeah, you learn a lot about yourself. That's for sure. You learn if you can work hard and get up every single morning. And a year after high school, so I graduated high school in 1995. A year after high school, I got married to my high school girlfriend. We moved down to Cherryville, North Carolina, which was where her family was from. And I started working for the telephone company, and did put in the underground telephone lines, did that for several years. And it's tough. I mean, you're working in the environment, you're working
right
out in the cold and the heat every single day. And you start to build up, I think, what real life is like, and you start to understand. And we had a son a year after we got married, and now you have real responsibilities, and that continued on until 2001, and that at that point the marriage unfortunately didn't make it, and that 2001, that was decision time for me. I had to really decide at that point, what was I going to continue to do.
So in 2001, that was a big year for you, because after high school, nothing seemed to go right. That time you met Jimmy Valvano in your youth, talking about maybe one day I'll be a high school coach, and then you go into high school and you graduate and you're working, construction, and you're getting married, you're doing other things as far as manual labor is concerned. But you said in 2001, you moved back to Henderson in with your dad, and you had an opportunity. You interviewed for a job at a factory, but out of the blue, you decided just to go by Lewisburg.
Yep.
Tell us about that.
So I moved back in with my dad in Henderson, living in Henderson, North Carolina, and he got me an interview at this factory in Oxford, North Carolina, and I interviewed for it, and they said, yeah, you get the job. It was actually a decent paying job for a factory job, good benefits. The day before, I had gone by Lewisburg College, and the basketball coach there was Coach Drake, Drake, that coached there for 42 years. And I knew him because I grew up in that area, and I had gone to his little kids camps in the 4th and 5th grade, all through middle school. And he recruited me in high school to come there and play. And that was one of the opportunities that I didn't take. And so I go by the day before, and I sit in his office and I talk to him, and amazingly, he still remembered me. And I said, Coach, I'm thinking about going back to school to become a teacher and a coach. And I was wondering, if I did that, could I be like a manager for you? Could I sit on the bench and, help you? And that's when he changed my life. Coach Drake changed my life in the next statement. He said, yeah, you can do that. And this next statement, he said, well, what about playing? And I almost fell out in the chair laughing. I said, Coach Drake, I ain't touched a basketball in 4 years. And he said, okay. He said, I get that. And he said, but we have some money aside for scholarships. And he said, if you can make the team, then I can give you more money than if you just be a manager. He said, give manager, I give you a little bit, but the tuition at Lewisburg is high. And he said, I can't give you much, but I give you more if you make the team. And oh man, that just set the wheels off in my head. And so I had that interview the next day, and my dad said, you're crazy. Take this factory job. They got benefits. You work there for 30 years, you'll be good to go. And but when Coach Drake said something about playing, I think that was kind of all it took. And I said, no, I'm not going to take that factory job. I'm going back to school. And I spent the next 3 months absolutely killing myself to try to get in shape, because I had put on a lot of weight. And I spent the next 3 months trying to get myself in shape and just learn if I could still play the game, because I kid you not, about touching a basketball. It had been 4 years since I had touched one. And I am so glad that Coach Drake asked me that question, because he set in motion what would ultimately become, me, getting a coaching job and doing what I love.
That must have been a tremendously humbling experience when you walked in there and you just asked to be a manager.
Mm-hmm.
Because your aspirations was, you wanted to play basketball at the collegiate level, but things hadn't gone your way, and you spent, the years in construction and so forth and so on, that you just had to go in there and say, you know what, Coach, I'll just be a manager on the team, and I just want to learn. And
would have loved it, and would have, anybody who knows Coach Drake or knows things about Coach Drake, the man, he coached college basketball for 42 years, high school basketball for 10 years before that, and he's forgotten more basketball than I will ever know. And so I would have sat beside him forever. Sorry about the dog.
Sorry.
1 second. Sorry, Coach. Nolan? Rick, can we take a pause for 30 seconds? Let me get the dog out of the house. We were talking about Coach Drake. When he asked me about that, I worked hard, and I overdid it. I just obliterated my back and my knees, trying to get back in shape and be able to make the basketball team. And I ended up getting to tryouts 2 quarters on shots later, just to be able to try out. And it wasn't enough. I didn't make the team. I just was not good enough. I did not have enough time to get myself back in shape. And he said, okay, well, you be a manager and, help me out. And so I did that entire year, sat with him, did laundry, sat in his office, and just did everything that I could possibly do to soak it up. And in my second year, I had enough time to get back in shape, and I made the team my second year, my sophomore year. And what was great about that is that I did not have a normal kind of player-coach relationship. I was older than most of the guys on the team. And, so in between classes, I just spent time in Coach Drake's office. We'd watch film, we'd plan practices. I'd go up to Granny's hot dog stand, and he'd give me $5, and he'd say, Gary, go up there and get me, 2 hot dogs with mustard, chili, and onions. I still remember exactly what he wanted. And $5, I could get 2 hot dogs for him and 2 for me. If that tells you anything about Granny's, but we spent a lot of time together. And I think that's when I knew for sure that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a basketball coach, and Coach Drake changed my life, because had I not stopped in that day to just talk to him, I may still be working in a factory right now.
You must have had a tremendous amount of reflection at that point in time in your life, because going from high school, and that we talked about before, going into being a construction worker, and then really not knowing what you're going to do with the rest of your life, and just having that one opportunity that you stopped by Lewisburg College and met with the coach, and he took the time. He remembered you when you were in your youth. He took the time. That had to mean the world to you, and probably, as of this day, probably the one person that you look up to more than anybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. That he took the time, and he always took the time. He always made the time. I never stopped by his office and the door wasn't open, and that was for every player on the team. He was that way for every player on the team, but he knew that I wanted to coach, and so I never went in and he said, hey, Gary, can you give me a few minutes? I'm working on something. If he was working on something, he would say, hey, Gary, come in here and sit down and tell me what you think about it.
Right.
And he always brought me in and would ask me. So we didn't have that normal player coach relationship, but that was perfectly fine with me, because I knew what I wanted to do, and it wasn't play basketball. That was just kind of fulfilling a dream. And I didn't, my sophomore year, I barely saw the floor, and I was okay with that. I learned so much about myself. Obviously being one of the better basketball players on my high school team. But then, being in a college team and everybody is really good. I learned a lot about myself, that whether I play or not does not, it doesn't have a bearing on who I am as a person.
And I would imagine the lessons you learned then as a player has helped shape and mold who you are today as a basketball coach for Weddington High School. Now, after Lewisburg, you got your associate degree. Then you transferred to UNC Charlotte, and you were the manager under Bobby Lutz for 2 years, correct?
That's right. That's correct. Actually, one full year, and then my senior year, to be honest with you, was kind of in and out, because I was getting ready to graduate and was just trying to figure out my next steps. What high school I was going to apply for, doing my teaching, in classroom teaching kind of thing. So it was very difficult my senior year to actually be a full-time manager. But my junior year, I was there all the time. And that was a great experience. I learned a lot from Coach Lutz. It was a very different experience than Lewisburg. I struggled with it, to be perfectly honest with you. I learned a lot from Coach Lutz for preparation, his preparation for practice and scouting, and his understanding of the game. His intelligence is off the charts. But coming from the situation I had in Lewisburg, where I was spending literally hours every single day with Coach Drake in his office, just picking his brain, Coach Lutz just couldn't do that. That's not feasible at the Division I level for a manager to be able to sit in the head coach's office and just talk basketball. He's got too many other things going on. And, I don't know if my expectations were, I guess they were just different because of what I had just came from. And so I kind of struggled with the fact that I didn't get to spend more time with the coaches at UNC Charlotte. But needless to say, it was a valuable experience on practice planning, scouting, and just preparation, because I don't think anyone was better than Coach Luke at that, at preparing for opponents and practice and those kind of things. So it was a great experience. And ultimately it just opened more doors.
So when you graduated from UNC Charlotte in 2006, there was an opening at Weddington, and you became the assistant coach and also the head coach of the JV team, and you were doing that for 1 year.
Correct.
And then after your 1 year status there, the head coach left to go to Texas, and of course there's an opening. So here you are, just fresh out of college at UNCC, and you have your first year, your first full-time job in the coaching profession as a JV coach and the assistant to the varsity. Then that job comes open. What were the thought processes going through your mind? Did you think you had a legitimate chance of landing that job?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Was it divine intervention?
It was, yeah, and it's another good story. But so truthfully, I was hoping to be the assistant coach for whoever they hired. I was a lateral entry teacher because I had not passed the practice at that point, and so there was no guarantee. Not that I would even have a coaching job. There was no guarantee I'd have a teaching job the following year. And so Coach Newton, Don Newton, was the head coach there. He was a great coach, and I learned a lot from him as well. So he leaves to go to Texas, and the job comes open, and I apply, and I think later Miss Carol Alley was the athletic director, and she I think she said like 30 something people applied. And so I interviewed for the job, and I thought, well, there's slim hope. Maybe they'll keep me around and let me be the assistant coach for whoever they hire. And I was in class teaching, and Miss Alley knocked on the door, and I kicked to the door, and she handed me an envelope, and she said, "This came for you today." And I said, "For me?" And I looked at it, and at first I was confused, and she pointed to the title at the front, and the title on the top of the envelope was head men's basketball coach. And it took me about 5 seconds to figure it out. And then, most coaches are supposed to act when they get a job, all serious about it. I gave her a big old hug. I was hugging her, and I was, oh my God, I can't believe this. And so no, I really thought that I didn't have a chance. And so later I asked Miss Alley, because I owe a lot to her. She stuck with me those first 2 years when I was screwing everything up. And I asked Miss Alley, I said, "What made you give me the job over all those other people?" She said, "It was simple." She said, "You had no guarantee of a job, teaching job or otherwise, the following year. But when Coach Newton left, you kept doing workouts with the players, not knowing if you would even be back next year." She said, "You were taking 25 kids and working them out every single day after school with no guarantees whatsoever." And she said, "And you did it because it was the right thing to do." And she said, "So I knew you were the right one." And
Wow.
that meant a lot.
Amazing story.
Yeah.
I'm going back looking at your resume, and you're saying, okay, from 1996 to 2001, you're a construction worker.
Mm-hmm.
You have to swallow a lot of pride. You moved back in with your dad in 2001, and now you're the head coach at Weddington. But, going back and looking at your record, Coach, you've done a tremendous job at Weddington. You've won 221 games. Against only 126 losses, a great win-loss percentage. You've won 4 conference championships. You've won 3 conference tournament championships, and you've made it to the Elite 8 twice. For someone who came from where you came from, to me, is an amazing story. It is, like you said, it's very intriguing story, but I do think it's a great success story. Let me
Thank you.
ask you
I
this,
appreciate it.
Coach. What are your biggest takeaways and life lessons you've learned from your journey, where you started and where you are today?
Um, so many. One is adversity. Adversity. What I've learned is adversity makes you stronger. Um, you know, my dad passed away from cancer the year I got that JV coaching job. Never saw me one time. Never saw me coach a game, and I that you know I that bothers me in some ways because I wish that he could see that the work ethic that he instilled in me ultimately paid off down the road. And adversity is what makes you stronger if you know how to handle it. I didn't know how to handle it as a 18-year-old kid that just graduated high school, and and I learned through years of just messing things up and figuring things out that adversity is actually your friend. As far as coaching goes, be yourself. Right? When I first started coaching at Weddington, I tried to be Coach Newton, and that was a problem. Coach Newton was a great coach, but I wasn't Coach Newton, and so what I've learned is to just be myself whenever I'm doing anything. I try to just be who I am and not try to be anyone else. And then lastly, do something for people and don't expect anything in return. I mean that's ultimately why I'm in this position. The reason why Miss Allie gave me an opportunity. Um, I just did something for kids that was the right thing to do, not because I expected anything in return. And I think if you go through life just doing things for people, it seems to work out for you in the end. If you put other people first, and that's what I've tried to do in the last you know few years when I've learned about myself and learned how to handle adversity and life.
Well, I'm sure, Coach, that what you've gone through, the adversity from your childhood through high school, throughout your college career and where you are today, I'm sure you're able to relate to a lot of the young players that come through your program. And I think the other lesson, more than anything else, is, you said be yourself, um, and most importantly, serve others. And
Mm-hmm.
what you've done is you have a very humbling background that you've learned along the way, but you've been able to take what you've learned and apply it to a school like Weddington, which, when we really think about it, has not had a storied history because it's a fairly new school. But what you've done in a short period of time is really amazing.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and that's you know lucky as a coach. I tell my players this all the time. I am lucky as a coach that they let me coach them hard, and they let me push them to the levels that they would otherwise probably not get to. And it took me a while, and I said it earlier about Miss Allie standing behind me. It took me a couple of years to realize that you can't you can't coach kids the way we were coached nowadays. And you can push kids hard and they will let you push them hard, but only after you have a relationship with them.
Right.
And when you have a relationship with them, they want you to push them. And my first couple of years, I didn't. I tried to push too hard without building that relationship first, and that was something that I had to learn. And again, I just had to be myself. I was trying to be someone that I wasn't. I had to be myself. And once I started doing that and having a relationship with the players, then everything seemed to work out the way it's supposed to.
Well, usually when you develop that relationship with your players and they know that you have their back and that you're going to be there for them and you want the best for them, they'll run through a brick wall for you. They'll do anything in the
Absolutely.
world that you ask them to do. And I think what you talked about as far as learning on the job and learning from your mistakes, I think what you can take from that is, you know, you can apply what you've learned and relay it to the players, and
Right.
you know what they're going through, and you can tell them in a way that they can appreciate what you've been through as well as a person, as a coach. I would think that would make a great relationship between player and coach at Weddington.
Yeah, I think it has, and you know, and that's, you know, like a lot of coaches, we talk about that. It's just life isn't going to be, you know, easy all the time, and you know, having commitment. We talk a lot about commitment, and having commitment to something means that you're going to stick it out no matter what, and you know, you can't bail when things start to get bad, and you know, maybe don't go your way, and I think that's something I've learned along the way, and I try my best to get the players to get that and give it to them, not necessarily in basketball sense, because you know, give it to them in a more real world, you know, because I can tell them, listen, when you're married, things aren't going to always be great. There are going to be bumps. They're going to be, you know, and you got to be able to just stick it out, and you got to be able to roll with the punches sometimes, and I think that's worked out for us, because the players have been committed to everything we've tried to do, and have worked really hard for us, and I appreciate it.
Well, Coach, thank you for sharing your story. I think your story is one that a lot of people need to hear, just how to overcome adversity. And I think, you know, the game of life, we all have to overcome adversity, but I think yours is one that hopefully a lot of people will take a listen to, and hopefully that we'll get a chance to come by and watch when open gym, when we get back to
Great.
the new normal, that we can come by and watch you in open gym. And we hope to invite your team to some of our high school jamborees and get you in some of our Phenom events for this coming year. But
That'd be
again,
great.
thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your story, and best of luck this coming season.
Thank you, Rick. I appreciate you having me.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.